Welcome everyone, another round of Blueprint Live. Today, my topic is the new Google Search Ranking Systems Guide that they just published yesterday. And I want to start with the less surprising things. Number one is that PageRank is still part of the ranking system. Surprise, like we knew this for forever. What's interesting is that Google says to use several systems to understand backlinks and the relevance of links, but altogether it's like really it's not really something new. The other interesting thing is what they call neural matching. Neural matching is one of several machine learning technologies that Google uses in search, and they use that to understand concepts that you cover in your content based on entities. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But the important thing to understand about all the AI technology that Google uses in their algorithms is that some of them apply to the actual content on your page or on your site, and others just apply to better understand what users are looking for. And this is a differentiation that a lot of people don't make. They will say, for example, oh yeah, you have to, consider BERT when optimizing your content, but BERT is a system that understands what users are looking for. So there's no system in BERT that looks at the actual content that you have. So just wanted to make that differentiation. Thanks, Elna. That works perfectly. Guide to Google search ranking systems. And the first one that I want to talk about is neural matching. And neural matching has been explained a while ago. There's this really interesting article here about how AI powers great search results. I can strongly recommend reading that. It takes 5 minutes according to Google. And they published it this year. And it's about, RankBrain, neural matching, and BERT, and explains a little bit about how all these systems play together. But the important thing to understand is that neural matching is about the content on your site. And it's when Google speaks about concepts in queries, what they actually mean are so-called entities. And entities, just to make that a bit more tangible, are any concepts around places, people, books, topics, basically anything that you can explain to someone is an entity, if you will. And Google published this article a long time ago where they showed that by using so-called embeddings, they're able to understand entities. I don't want to make this too technical, but in essence, Google is able to plot concepts on a mathematical graph and understand their distances and relationships. So long story short, Google understands content pretty well, and neural matching is a large driver for that. And then on the other side stands RankBrain, which is a system that looks at the concepts in your search query. This is the opposite of neural matching. If neural matching looks at your content, RankBrain looks at the searches from users and tries to understand what they mean, even if they don't explicitly say what they mean. Example would be the concept could be SEO, and the implicit or the search query could be something like the discipline to optimize websites for Google, right? So it doesn't mention SEO, but everybody understands that it's implied, and RankBrain is kind of the machine learning technology that helps Google understand that. And then the third important one that we've that I've already been starting to speak about is really BERT. And BERT is also a system that looks at the meaning of what people are searching for, so in search queries, and it's not looking at the content of websites. So what BERT does differently compared to RankBrain is that BERT looks at the intent. So what are people actually trying to do? Are they looking for inspiration or for tutorials or for a specific piece of information? And RankBrain looks at these concepts in the search query. They're obviously very related and they work together, but they have these different roles, and they both look at what people search for, not at the content. This is super important to understand. What was also not so surprising was passage ranking. So passage ranking is basically understanding meaning on a paragraph level, right? So the whole background here is that Google said, hey, we want to understand if maybe the whole piece of content is not so great, but there's one paragraph that's absolutely killing it. We're going to reward that paragraph and try to highlight that in the search results. And then also not very surprising were product review systems. Google has been loud about that a lot. It's basically a system that looks at whether the writers or the affiliates or whoever have actually tried the product out, or if they just write about the product inferring from what they read on the internet. And then the last one that also wasn't super interesting were these spam detection systems. Maybe one thing that I missed a little bit was this idea of spam brain. I don't know if everybody else caught this, but spam brain, RankBrain had no idea that this concept even exists, but it is a classical spam detection stuff. There wasn't anything in there about backlinks, which I would have found very interesting, but it's just like generally, don't deceive users, don't block anything from Google, that's important that users will see, don't cloak. It's kind of the classic type of stuff. And this is also where you see me getting very angry at this documentation, which is, it's almost like a parody. Exact match domain systems. So this is very interesting. So they actually say, hey, So first we're going to explain what they say and then what makes me angry, right? So they say that the systems consider words in domain names as one of many factors to determine content relevance, okay? So I thought for a long time that exact match domains are dead and they don't have any boost. And all of a sudden Google says, oh no, we look at that and, we might consider that for relevance. Okay. And they say our systems make sure that we don't give too much credit for content hosted under domains designed to exactly match particular queries. Okay, so now they're saying we look at that, but we don't give it too much credit, right? Too much credit has some credit, but not too much. Interesting. And then they say someone might create a domain name containing, some like queries in the hopes that all these words in the domain will propel content high in the ranking. So now they say somebody might do this to get a ranking boost. Our system adjusts for this. Okay, so how does the system adjust for that? Right? They're basically saying, oh yeah, exact match domains still have some sort of an impact. And then they're saying, oh, but we want to make sure that people don't gain that. Like, who wrote this even? This is terrible. Absolutely terrible. But what I take away from this, my personal takeaway is that, apparently there is some value still to exact match domain systems. That was very, very surprising to me. Did not expect that at all. And I think, this might make for a great experiment. And I'm going to see if I can set something up to maybe, do like a very loose comparison of an exact match domain versus a branded domain, maybe with very similar content, and then see if I notice any differences. It's not something you can perfectly test, but that was certainly surprising to me that this even comes up of all the things, right? Like we have query freshness, we have helpful content, all very important things, neural matching, RankBrain, and then exact match domain systems. So that is interesting and also very confusing. So thumbs down to Google for this one. The second one, while I'm already going, site diversity system. Okay. Also very interesting, which basically means what they say here is we generally won't show more than 2 web page listings from the same site in our search results so that not a single site dominates. Okay, makes sense. That was kind of implied in the past. It's cool that they call this out again. To be honest, I didn't register that there's a limit of 2 web page results, but at Shopify, we've seen double ranks. At G2, we've seen double ranks. So it's not something that, necessarily blew me out of the park, but I was very surprised that they even mentioned these site diversity systems. Okay, now they contradict themselves again. Now they say, however, we may still show more than 2 listings in case where our systems determine it's especially relevant to do so for a particular search. It's basically saying we're not doing that anymore, but we might do that. Okay, doesn't make a lot of sense. And they even one-up themselves here. They even do it better. Next, they say site diversity generally treats subdomains as part of the root domain. Okay, so generally they say, okay, subdomain is almost like a subdirectory where it's an extension of the root domain. They're connected. And then they say, however, sometimes subdomains are treated as separate sites for diversity purposes when deemed relevant to do so. This is horrible. Like this whole paragraph needs to be set on fire and buried. This is absolutely crazy, right? So anyway, I think it's very contradicting. What I take away from this one is that generally they don't show more than 2 search results, but they have a door open to actually change their mind. When do they think it's important? Nobody knows. There's no clarity here. But anyway, that was interesting to see as well. And then the helpful content definition I wanted to show. What I found interesting when I looked a little bit further into the definitions here is that they keep coming back on this point about content being written by people for people. And initially, I thought that this is a dig at AI content, basically, content created with stuff like Jasper or Phrase or other AI writers. But I then changed my mind, and what I now think, based on the documentation that I've linked to here and the way that they frame this, is that the helpful content update is actually about user behavior. So they say here, helpful content written by people for people in the search results rather than content made primarily to gain search engine traffic. And what I now think here is that they actually look at search journeys to see if people have completed a search journey and if that specific content helped them in doing so. So let me take a step back here. A while ago, Google started to show these journeys in your Chrome browser history. So when you go to this browser history, you can switch between a list and journeys. And first of all, it's very interesting how deeply Google can understand the journeys. And that also tells me that Google can tell pretty well when a search journey has been completed, right? And I think what they're doing with the helpful content update is less that they go after AI content. I think what they're actually doing is to say, hey, which piece of content did users visit across a journey that helped them to complete their journey? And that makes a ton of sense, right? If you think of even for different intents, it makes a lot of sense. So if they search for brands, so they have like a navigational intent and they land on the brand's website, that completes their journey, right? If they're looking for information, like here, I did some research before this this call about the search systems guidance here on the internet. And then I saw, okay, the last thing that I saw was how AI powers great search results. So that has quote unquote completed my journey. Let's see what else we have. Substack ladders, forecasting templates, Twitter, Wayback Machine. Okay, that's some research here. Hummingbird, Google. Okay, so I searched for Hummingbird. And then the last thing that I saw was this Wikipedia article. So that for Google might be an indication that this article had a significant weight when it comes to the keyword Hummingbird Google, because it was the last article that I saw. And then I stopped searching, right? So the journey was completed. And so long story short, I think that's what the helpful content is all about. And that's why they keep highlighting written by people for people, because it's less about the actual content. It's more if the content helped people complete their journey. That was really eye-opening to me. And that was something new that I learned here. It should not matter who creates the content. All it should matter is if it helps the user or not. So I originally thought that Google digs about the helpful content is a dig on AI content. Now I think no, it's actually user behavior, and they just, as everything, they just word it in a very terrible way. Let's look at MUM. So MUM, that's been interesting. They confirmed that it's currently not used for general ranking and search, but it's really just a fact-checking mechanism. MUM, the unified model for multitasking, has caused a lot of attention and media coverage. And it's basically a system that can understand content across images, videos, audio, and text to understand how all these concepts are strung together. And it seems that right now they're just used for fact checking, specifically for some of the medical information that Google displays and some of the featured snippet callouts. There were some that had some false information, and MUM seems to be able to do that a lot better. I think that they still kind of test MUM in a way, and they see how accurate the concept understanding is. But I expect MUM to at some point replace RankBrain and maybe BERT as well, because we've already learned RankBrain and BERT look at the understanding of user queries, not at the content. All right. And then two more things that have been interesting are the retired systems. So Hummingbird, I was not aware that Hummingbird had been retired. It makes sense, and I think it's been retired by RankBrain. They don't call that out specifically here, but I've been doing some research about RankBrain, and I think Google had actually mentioned that. So it was probably just me forgetting this, but good to know. And by the way, Hummingbird was the first natural language system, partially machine learning driven, that Google used to understand meaning in words, right? So they also use that to understand what people are searching for, which then allows them to better match that with content. And so it's very related to RankBrain, and RankBrain has replaced this. And again, it comes back to understanding what people search for, being able to better match that with what's out there, which means that some content or some sites see an increase or a boost in traffic simply because their content really matches what people are trying to find. But it does not mean that the content itself has been reevaluated. It's that the search query of the user has been reevaluated. And that's when you see these things where Google rolls out a new update and you see a traffic impact, but you look at the keywords and you see maybe, a lot of them change from like position 3 to 4 or from like 5 to 4 or something, like small, tiny changes. You're like, how does this even make sense? That's when Google's understanding of language gets better. And Hummingbird was one of the first systems that did that. And then the other one that I found interesting also was the mobile ranking system being retired. So the mobile friendly ranking system, better said. So what I found interesting about that is they say they roll this into page experience system, and when we look at what's involved in page experience, let's quickly go to the documentation here. So we have mobile friendly still in here, which means it's still alive. It's just part of a larger system here. So this is the third maybe contradiction, if you will. Google is very, very weird with the language that they use and the way that they explain things. So I'm going to talk about some conclusions from this in just a moment, but I wanted to come back to a question from Casper. Casper asked, Kevin, what are your thoughts on the algorithm's intelligence in foreign countries? That's a great question. My observation is that some of these algorithms are language agnostic, so they actually help Google understand language better without having to know the language, and others are much, much worse for other languages and predominantly work for English language. And usually Google calls that out as well in their announcement. They usually say, oh, this affects all countries or just English speaking countries. I think MUM, for example, if I understood it right, don't fact check me on this, or maybe do. MUM is specifically for English language queries, even though it might be able to understand other languages. And I think some of the other systems that we spoke about, like neural matching and like RankBrain, I think are language agnostic. But you might want to fact check me on this and make sure I'm correct here, because I actually haven't looked this up. Eric has another point he shares. If Google has certain search characteristics that must be met for a site to show 3 or more organic search listings per page, testing to find out how that decision is made would make us able to dominate pages, especially for local. 3PEG and multiple organic listings would dominate local markets. Oh, okay, got it. So I think that's a comment on Google basically limiting most domains to 2 web pages. And I understand your points correctly here. It would be amazing to figure out how to get 3. And, just anecdotally, it's interesting. I did notice 3 before, and I still notice 3 sometimes. One example is Yelp. I see Yelp sometimes showing up more than 2 times. TripAdvisor, even with Shopify, we had a couple of queries that we had more than 2 search results for. So, and these are not branded queries. This is not people searching for Yelp and then Restaurants Chicago. This is other stuff. But, I think this needs a larger analysis or study to say how true that really is. And that might help us to understand when Google makes exceptions, right? You might have noticed that a lot of times here things are contradictory, and to understand when Google makes exceptions or not could be very helpful and should be possible with the data that we have at hand. Okay, some conclusions from this quote unquote guide or from this documentation. So number one, obviously you might have already, inferred that, but be careful with Google's PR machine, right? So they often say that they say things, but then actually don't. So you want to think very critically, and you don't want to take things literally that they say in these guides. You want to look at those things. You want to think about these critically, but you don't want to take them for God's word. Okay. So make sure you look at empirical studies and tests. And then I would also suggest to test everything that they say, right? So I would now go back and look at SEMrush or Ahrefs and a couple of companies that I work with and see, do they have any triple rankings? Do they have any double rankings? And do I see any patterns? Where is that really the case? Or do I, can identify any of the other stuff that they're saying here about exact match domains, for example, right? So just as an example, a really important keyword at Shopify for us was a business name generator, and been fighting against businessnamegenerator.com for a while. And to be fair, they do some good SEO, but now I wonder, what does it say that they, have the exact match domain, so the exact match keyword in the domain? Same with how to start an LLC and some other sites. So that makes me re-question some of the, my assumptions. And the best thing you can do is just actually look at your keywords and maybe run some tests if you can.